All right, everybody, welcome to week number 6, day number 2. Today we are going to take a look at pitches on the treble clef staff. So we're going to dive in here. This is going to be where we are starting to use the staff a little bit more. We're going to learn a little bit more about the treble clef, and we are going to start naming those lines and spaces. So let's review just a little bit here. Thinking all the way back to week 4. Please remember that we had several elements of the staff. We did talk about things like time signature, and we did talk about things like the clef. The time signature we focused on a little bit more in recent weeks. We're going to switch that focus to change to the clef and the staff a little bit more kind of focused. So the treble clef right there in green is at the very beginning of the staff. And what it does is it helps us know which strategies we are going to use to name the lines and spaces that are on the staff. Speaking of the staff is where pitches and rhythms are contained. It is composed of 5 parallel lines, which naturally creates 4 spaces. We have a new term here, folks. We do have the term pitch. I want you to make sure that you are memorizing this term because I'm going to use it a lot. So the term pitch is very important because it refers to the sound of each letter name on the staff and how high or low that sound is. So let me say that one more time for you. Pitch refers to the sound of each letter name on the staff and how high or low that sound is. So if you have like a piano, for example, when you push one of those keys, you are creating a pitch. It's going to be the sound associated with a specific letter name. So each of the lines and spaces on the staff has a letter name that we use. So that way when we read music, we are all reading the same thing. We all understand what that means. And rather than learning how to play the one song that I teach you in class, you can learn how to play any song that exists. Speaking of the 7 letters in the musical alphabet, each of those represent a specific pitch. The 7 letters are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Those are the 7 letters that we have. Now, an important thing to remember about the 7 letters is that they repeat when we get to the end of them. So in music, yes, we only have 7 letters, but every single piece of music you've ever heard in your life is made up of different versions of those 7 letters. Sometimes we can have, for example, an F be a low note. Other times it can be a higher note, things like that. So that's something really important to remember is that the letters repeat. So what you'll notice is on the staff, sometimes we're going to have more than one of the same letter represented at the same time. So moving on here, we're going to take a look at the lines and spaces. Like I said earlier, because it is made up of 5 parallel lines, there are naturally 4 spaces that are created between each of those lines. Each of the lines and spaces gets its own number, but we have to start at the bottom. Now, this is real important because just about every musician is going to use the same 5 numbers in the same place. So that means that we are going to have an easier time speaking to people who are musicians in other places. So starting at the bottom, the first line is number 1, the second is number 2, etc., etc. The same thing goes for the spaces. The first space is the bottom space towards the bottom of that staff. So in music, we use strategies to assign a letter to each line or space, and that is the pitch that we are going to play when we are playing instruments or singing or things like that. When using the strategies, like it says there, we always have to start at the bottom. Otherwise, those strategies do not work. So if there's something you're remembering right now, it's that you have to start at the bottom of the staff. All right, folks? Moving on here to our line note strategy. So each of the 5 lines represents a letter that can be played on an instrument or sung by your voice. So each of those different ones are labeled, starting again at the bottom of the staff. We have E, G, B, D, and F. Now, if you don't want to just memorize the letters, we have a strategy that we use that's going to help you to remember these because it's a sentence that's going to jog your memory on these. The strategy we use is every good boy does fine. Now, some of you might have learned every good boy deserves fudge. That's not wrong. At Duker here, I like to use one strategy for every single student to make sure that we are all able to speak to one another using the same terminology. A little quick story here. My first year of teaching, I gave the students the choice on which strategy they would like to use, and it kind of backfired. We had a bunch of people thinking there were different strategies for different things, so that was a mistake that I had made that I ended up correcting. I decided that we were going to use one strategy for everything, just to make sure that we are all on that same page. So please remember, though, with this strategy, every good boy does fine is the one we're using here at Duker. The first letter of each word is the name of the line. Now, if you look at the staff and you say, oh, that middle line is boy, and you go talk to like a middle school musician, like if you got a friend who's in band in middle school or choir, they're going to look at you and be like, no, it's a B, and give you this kind of, a little bit of a hard time about it. Because yes, we do use the strategy word boy, but that's not what the line is. The line is the letter B. So that's an important thing to remember, that the first letter of each word is what is going to give you the name of that note. All right. Moving on here to our space note strategy. Each of the 4 spaces represents, again, very much like the lines, it represents a note that you can sing or play. Starting at the bottom, the letters are labeled F, A, C, and E. Now, again, sometimes we have a little bit of difficulty just memorizing things right off the top. So we can use a 4-letter word that's going to help us to remember this. So it is the word face, because those 4 letters, F-A-C-E, spells face. So one thing to remember, though, it's the 4 letters are the names of the spaces. So it's not face on the first space and then you do something different. It's F, A, C, and then E. All right. So there are our lines and spaces. Now, the way that I wrote this out, it looks like they all are in like a different place and they have to be there. The lines and spaces, the letter names can come anywhere on the staff. The reason that they look like this right now on your screen is to just make it easier to read. Now, obviously, when you read a real piece of music, they don't just follow the strategies, because that would end up making every piece of music sound the same. And let's be real, that gets a little bit boring. So just because they are in a certain place right now does not mean that they are always going to be in that place. The only thing we always have to make sure we do is start at the bottom of the staff to make sure that those strategies work correctly. So a little bit of review for this lesson here, ladies and gentlemen. The staff, remember, is where the notes are going to be placed. The notes and rhythms are going to be placed. It is made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces. Each of those lines and spaces has its own letter name. The letter name is going to be the pitch. And pitch, remember right there it says, a musical term that means the sound of each letter name on the staff. So it's talking about what you're hearing and how high or low that sound is. The musical alphabet, which we spoke about a little bit here, is made up of 7 letters which repeat. Those 7 letters, remember, are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. When we get to the end of the musical alphabet, we repeat over again. We can have multiple of the same letter on the staff at a time. They can go in different places. You can have lower notes that are the same letter as higher notes, things like that. Okay? The letter name is just telling us what sound we're going to hear, and where they are positioned on the staff tells us how high or low they are going to be. The lines on the staff are numbered from 1 through 5, and this always starts at the bottom. The same thing goes for the spaces. They are numbered 1 through 4, and again start at the bottom. Now, sometimes you'll hear me say, what is the 4th line? So that means that I want you to tell me the letter name of line number 4. So it would be that second line from the top. You would have to use those strategies to remember what those are going to be. So if I was talking about line number 4, I would know that my strategy, like it says right here, for the line notes is every good boy does fine. Now I would take the 4th word in that sentence and the first letter of that word, because remember, the strategies use words or create a word to show you what letter it's going to be. For the line note strategy, the first letter of each word is always going to be the name of that note. So for the fourth line, it would be a D because we have every good boy does is the fourth word, and that's the first letter of the word does. So if I was talking about spaces and I wanted like the second space, for example, you would have to remember that the strategy for spaces is face, spelling the word F-A-C-E. So you would take the second letter of that word, which is the letter A, and that would be the note that is on the second space. Now, one thing to really keep in mind, these strategies only work when you are starting at the bottom of the staff. If you try to go every good boy does fine, the only word that's going to line up there is B because it's right in the middle. Space no strategy won't work at all, and all except for one line will be incorrect. So please, right now, push the save button on starting at the bottom of each line or space to use your strategies. All right. So we're going to get a little bit of practice doing this stuff. We are going to get a little bit of practice writing out those strategies, making sure that we remember those, because some of us learn best by talking, saying those strategies out loud. Some of us learn best by seeing, which is this screencast right here. And some of us learn best by writing or being able to do something physical with that. So that's why we're going to try to hit all of those different learning strategies to help every single one of you get this down as best you can. So we're going to move on here. We're going to get some practice. We're going to start trying to solidify our knowledge of the lines and spaces and the pitches on the treble clef staff.